So welcome this afternoon. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Thank you for muting your phone or computer so that we can proceed with a minimum amount of audio technology interference. My name is Vonnie Hawkins, and I'm with SocialWorx Institute, and joining me today will be Caitlin Canfield from LPHI, our data guru, and she's going to be talking to you about the pipeline data that many of you received a little earlier this week, and most of you should have received probably this morning. I hope that you have joined me today with a copy of the RFP and also a copy of the comprehensive community reentry plan document. Does everybody have those available to you? If you're joining us, some of you may not be familiar with the LAPRISTA organization or project, which is the LA-PRI Steering Team Association. We are a project of SocialWorx Institute, and we have a number of funders. We have not updated our slide to include that United Way of Southeast Louisiana is now one of our funders, and I am enjoying working with Michael Williamson and Mary Ambrose and their team to get this work done. LAPRISTA's mission is to promote high fidelity implementation of the LA-PRI model. And we've been meeting with our stakeholders and listening to how things are rolling out in your local communities, and we're listening, and here's what we're hearing, and I just want to give voice to this. There is some confusion as we're bringing these changes about roles and responsibilities, that there are some folks who are still kind of trying to figure out what piece of the puzzle they are in rolling out LA-PRI. And I would like to just acknowledge that all of that confusion and discomfort is part of undertaking something of this scope and magnitude to address an issue with this level of involvement with so many elements of government and nonprofit and returning citizens. And so it's a heavy lift, and it's an ocean liner, not a speedboat. So as we are shifting the status quo of how things have been being done for, decades and decades, and these are things that have not worked and have contributed to the over-incarceration of Louisiana, as we make these changes and as we bring our broad-based stakeholders, which is government and our faith-based leaders and our returning citizens activist groups and the service providers and the probation and parole officers and folks like us who are technical assistance providers, when we're coming together and we're talking about how we're going to do things differently, that discomfort and that uncertainty is part of that process. So what I'd like to challenge everyone to do is just a couple of things. When you're dealing with LA-PRI and your LA-PRI work, take a deep breath and tell yourself that you are doing the best that you can, and there's no expectation for you to be any further along than you are. And we are here to work together and answer each other's questions and be open and candid about that process. So I want you to give yourself permission to feel uncomfortable and uncertain, but I want you to also pair that with an acknowledgement that that's part of making changes that are so big like this. And so the other thing that I want to put out there is I'm hearing that there are structures that are in these local communities that are changing, and folks are moving around, and meetings are being attended or not attended. And so I want to encourage you to have dialogue with your community partners about where you fit and what you can do to be a part of this process. And do it without hurt feelings. Do it without Do it with that hypothesis of generosity that some of you have heard me talk about, which means giving people the benefit of the doubt that they're doing the best that they can, and that if something happens that causes you some discomfort, it likely wasn't intentional or it was an oversight, and just give that other person the presumption that it wasn't done intentionally. And then keep the work at the center of what we're doing. We're all working together to make things better for returning citizens and to implement practices and policy and services that will improve citizens, returning citizens' success. And LAPRI is particularly devoted to improving the success of those who have been most likely to fail. So part of LAPRI is about pivoting the statewide way that community reentry has been done to help those who are most likely to fail, those who most need the help. And some of you have heard me sort of use a metaphor of we've all been operating sort of like urgent care centers, but we need to pivot and organize our communities into some urgent cares and some emergency rooms who are trained and ready to handle the heart attacks in the ambulance, and who are also going to say, if you have a broken finger, let me refer you to my organization over here that is an urgent care that can get to you more quickly, or that has services and service providers that are more tuned to the types of work that you need. Because we need some subset of every community to go through a process to think about, should I be in urgent care? Does it make sense for me? Does it make sense for my board? Does it make sense for my mission? Does it make sense for the way my budget and fundraising operate? Does it make sense for the internal capacity that my organization has? If it does, but you don't have that capacity, then LAPRISTA's job is to help you get the capacity so that you can become an urgent or become an ER and gain that capacity that you need to pivot to serve moderate to high risk needs and high risk and need returning citizens. If it doesn't make sense for you to make that pivot, then you are still part of that overall community plan. But at this stage that LAPRI is being rolled out, which is we are just beginning the community needs assessment process, we are just beginning the community planning process, we are focusing on the target population that science tells us is the best place to put our limited resources to have the greatest impact the quickest. And so as a statewide initiative, we are working to get everyone on board with pivoting their community service delivery plan so that it is thinking about who in our community can take on screening for, intaking, and serving those returning citizens with moderate to high risk and need profiles, and giving them the services within a continuum of care so that they have a higher chance of success than they have been with the way that we have been doing it. And so I'm hoping that that is laying out a little more of the odds behind the curtain of LAPRI and what it's focusing on. The other thing I want to say is that LAPRI as a model anticipates that at some point in the future, it will be providing a wide array of services to a wide array of judicially involved persons. But at this point, we are asking your community needs or your community plans to allocate these JR resources to the prisoners. So not your jail population, your prisoners coming out of state facilities who fit that moderate to high risk profile. And so what Caitlin is going to talk about today is what does that target population look like? And so that was a whole lot. Does anybody have any questions very quickly before we move on about what I just shared? And you're welcome to put that in the chat box if you like, or we can unmute you so that you can use your audio. Okay, having no chats, we will move right along. So again, wanting to speak to sort of this overarching discomfort with what is the process that we're engaging and what are the long-term processes around that. Oh, I did make a note. I want to make it very clear to everybody on this call, and please tell your colleagues, PRISTA is not applying for justice reinvestment funds at all. And so I did, because we're listening, and that's what we're trying to do well and do better. We're listening to our stakeholders, and that was a concern that was had. So PRISTA is not applying for JR funds. We are funded by those folks that I told you at the beginning to provide hands-on and virtual assistance in implementing the LAPRI model, but we will not be participating in the JR funds. And so I hope that that is a comfort and a relief and a clarifier and a tension dissolver, so that we can get all of our tier 1 parishes to the table with this statewide initiative. So on the SocialWorx website, under the LAPRISTA Resource Center, and I'd like you all, when you have time, free time, between what, 2 and 4 in the morning, but this resource center is being developed so that all of the resources that you need for the work that you're doing, you have current versions of those documents there, and you can return to that place to download them anytime that you need to. One of the aspects of that website is the community implementation plan. And so what you're looking at on the slide there is just a cut and paste from that area. So you can go back and look at that anytime that you want to. I would say that this phased list of steps in the community implementation plan is certainly the ideal. And under practical circumstances, you might look at that and say, well, that's not how it rolled out in my parish. This has been adapted to meet local needs and to meet local resources, and you know, sometimes it is affected by the availability of certain folks to come and take leadership positions, to those who demonstrated enthusiasm may have stepped up. One of the things that popped out in some of our stakeholder listening sessions was the fact that while it was always envisioned that the initial group of folks who came together with LAPRI were intended to be sort of a search and nominating committee who would ultimately recruit the members of the LAPRI structure at a later date. Expediency and practicality and the need to get these structures in place quickly so that the work to be done could be done as quickly as possible probably took out this part. And what I've heard from some parishes is that the fact that it was an unintentional and organic process based on sort of who stepped forward to take leadership roles and commit the time to lead to chair a committee or to serve as a presiding community chair. That happened sort of organically and unintentionally, and it may have left some folks feeling left out. And so what LAPRISTA is doing is going to work very diligently to identify some stakeholders and some expertise to look at that process and make sure that it is done very intentionally at the next round, and that there are leadership opportunities, particularly for people of color, when these LAPRI steering teams are formed, and that there are other equity and diversity issues that are addressed that are sort of emerging as this kind of unintentional organic process is unfolding. And so what I would ask is that if that has been your experience, I'd like you to send me an email and let me know where those challenges have been for you, because we want to make sure that the solution that we design is an open, transparent process, and that we are fully understanding what that lived experience is for you in your local parish. And so I'm hoping that that will serve to let some folks in some parishes feel heard, and that this process will alleviate some of those concerns and difficulties in the local parishes. So feel welcome to shoot me an email at LAPRISTA@socialworx.org if that is something that you're dealing with. So we most of us should be through phase 1 and phase 2. And so most of you should be in phase 3. And this is, you may or may not have a community coordinator in place. Your community assessment may or may not be complete, but it should be underway. If your community assessment is not underway, then please reach out to me and let's talk about where you are and what we can do to get you the resources you need to move that process along, so that you are receiving the information that you need and completing the steps of the process so that we meet this timeline for the RFP. So where we are right now, the comprehensive community reentry plan is being developed, and we are working with you to do that work. I also want to acknowledge that some people have said that there is some discomfort around how the funding is going to be distributed. So I just have 2 responses to that. One of them is that each steering team will need to determine what that process looks like. We took most of you through a process to identify an intermediary, and your intermediaries highly likely that they have expertise and can provide consultation as a neutral party on how to do that in a way that is fair and equitable and keeps the best outcomes for the most amount of returning citizens at the core. The other piece, I'm sure many of you attended the pre-proposal conference with the DOC on Friday, and one of the things that they shared that was not news to me, but I wanted to highlight it, is that one of the aspects of this is going to be looking at the proposals that have the lowest cost per client. And so in my mind, that was a little bit different a little bit different aspect of figuring out how to distribute the funds, because you're going to be looking at impact. You're going to want to distribute those funds according to the impact that they have at the lowest cost. Again, I just want to say that your intermediary will likely have subject matter expertise. Now, if you or your intermediary do not have subject matter expertise in that area, then I want you to reach out to us and let us work with you to design a solution that is fair and equitable for your community and your community plan. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, moving right along. So today we're focusing on building the comprehensive community reentry plan in terms of the evidence-based practice of targeting prisoners with the highest likelihood of recidivating. And Caitlin from LPHI is going to work with us on that. So just to go over a little bit, because, you know, they say you have to hear something 3 times before it sticks. So we want to make sure that you're getting the information that you need. We want to cover just very quickly the 7 core criteria for funding projects. You want to be thinking about specific measurable changes in systems, organizations, and participants that directly contribute to the reduction of recidivism. And so this circles back to the fact that that has to be core when you're thinking about how you're going to design your community plan and how you're going to distribute your funds. The work needs to reduce recidivism. it needs to be in alignment with the local LAPRI implementation goals, which are set by the LAPRI steering teams. But as we've said a couple of times, it needs to seek to address the needs of moderate to high risk and needs formerly incarcerated prisoners. Today, we're focusing on this third point, and these moderate to high risk needs will be established by the Tiger Risk Need Assessment Tool, which we understand will hopefully be rolling out very, very soon. There's also an element of LAPRI where a transition team goes into the institution before the release and works on getting some of this risk and need data as well. So in terms of how you as the service delivery model planners will use data to plan your service delivery model, that was a mouthful, I'll try to say that better, how you're going to use that, you're going to have different pieces of information, but I think your most specific piece, for example, how many people are homeless, how many will not need housing, how many will need, maybe some people will have been on Suboxone in the institution and they will need immediate transfer to those addiction services as soon as they get out. That level of detail of information is going to come from somewhere else, not the pipeline data. I just wanted to make that point because I think there was some expectation that the pipeline data would be a little bit more specific, but at this stage of the game, it is more about addressing the volume.
2 weeks, yeah. I thought yours was going to stay too. Okay.
Okay, so, and then additionally, we're talking about identifying the gaps in services in the region and working with community partners to fill that gap. So our ability to score well, your ability, not our ability because we're not applying, your ability to score well in the RFP review process is directly linked to your ability to perform effective community planning. So actually writing the proposal is going to be pretty easy if you've done this community planning work and answered the questions and the sections in the comprehensive community reentry plan document that I assume that you have with you and that I'm going to show on the screen in a little bit. And then if you've engaged in that process in your LAPRI steering team committees, to collaborate and plan and follow the evidence-based practice. So now that you have spent some time identifying assets, barriers, and gaps in your community, it's time to focus on the numbers. So very quickly, just covering this very quickly, some of you have already heard some of this, but there may be some new folks in the group. So, the community incentive grant is going to, it is related to the work that you've been guided to do. Those two things have evolved over time in reference to each other. And LAPRISTA and CJI have worked very hard to really cut down on the amount of work that you're going to have to do between the community needs assessment, the comprehensive community reentry planning, and completing the RFP. And so there should be a fair amount of cutting and pasting between these so that although it is 3 separate documents, it should be there should be a lot of harmony between the information in each of them. And then you'll just need to write a little bit of narrative to link those things together. So over the past 2 weeks, local steering teams were asked to focus on their asset barriers and gaps in at least 6 core areas of service. And if you've read the RFP, what you know is that they are actually suggesting that there are 5 areas of service. We're recommending that you include legal services in there because evidence-based practice says that that is tied very closely to success in those other areas. I have worked in some areas where issues like transportation are very, very important. Some of the more rural areas or areas without public transportation. If you went to the pre-proposal conference on Friday, I believe you probably heard that the service areas are prescribed. And so what I want to suggest to you is that as you're doing your community planning, you want to include the things that your community needs, but you need to put stuff like transportation under the category of an unmet need. PRISTA is going to work with all of the jurisdictions, both Tier 1 and Tier 2, to collect their unmet need data, and we're going to put that into a statewide portfolio of unmet needs, and we're going to provide additional support to seek funding from other resources beyond the Justice Reinvestment. So my encouragement to you is don't do your community planning in the context of just applying for JR funds, because we are going to continue to work to get these things funded, okay? The other piece is that in the JR fund round, your organization may not get funded even if you contributed to the community needs assessment or the comprehensive community plan. I have some ideas around that I'm not quite prepared to share with you because they haven't been brought to fruition. But what I want to say is, if you are coming to the table, if you're serving on committees, if you're being collaborative, if you're putting the needs of your community and the returning citizens that it serves at the center of your work, and you're dedicating time from your agency to do that work, we are going to do everything within our power to shop those needs wherever we can to get them funded. Okay. The other thing you need to remember is that we are focusing on a target population, and the JR funds are sort of a small pot of funds because even if you took the prescribed amount that they've talked about, I think on Friday they said around $3 million is the total. And even if you divided that by the 5 parishes, that amount of money still would not be enough to cover all the needs. So it was always in the plan that we're going to have to continue to look for ways to meet these unmet needs. For example, there are things like tax credits for housing, and we will be convening some maybe statewide level committees and task forces, as well as local committees and task forces, to look at other ways to get this work done. So the JR funds will be a cornerstone. They will definitely be a way to help us demonstrate that this model works and how it can work effectively. But let's keep an abundance mindset and keep our eye on getting the work, identifying what work needs to get done, and getting that work done, funded and done through a variety of funding opportunities. Quan Race asked if this presentation will be made available once the webinar is over. It is being recorded, and yes, we will put it up on the website. Does anybody have any questions about that? You're welcome, Quan. Okay, so now what I want to do is move into some of the things that we were unable to touch on at our last session because of some of the technical difficulties that we had. And so we're going to take about a few minutes, and we're going to go through the RFP and the way that it relates to the comprehensive community reentry plan document that you have. And I'm going to pull those up. So bear with me a moment. So I want you to turn to page 12 in the RFP, and then you're going to turn to page 6 in part 2 of the CCRP document. So bear with me while I get there. Okay. Is there anyone who can't see this well? Is it too small? Okay. So if you look at page 12, what you're going to see is the problem statement. Whoops, let me get back to page 6. Bear with me. Okay, so we've done some homework by studying the RFP and determining where there is a nexus with the comprehensive plan. I say we, Dennis and I. And there are components of the plan that are directly related to the RFP. So the main part really is if you start working with a very descriptive comprehensive plan document, you'll be doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the RFP, and it will help you tremendously. So look at page 12 toward the bottom, and you'll see problem statement. And so your problem statement should cover gaps in the target parish that this project will work to fill, relevant data or research that demonstrates the urgency of the problem, particularly data relevant to the parishes in which the proposer is proposing to work. The data that you're getting is this pipeline data, and you should have this pipeline data for your parish. And then, if applicable, any research, program evaluation, or prior program results inside or outside of the target parish that supports the project proposed or otherwise explains why the proposed project is best to meet the needs described. And so you will, the part of the CCRP, which is on the right hand of the screen, will give you the narrative information to complete this. You can talk about your demographics. You can talk about the how many are low need, moderate need, high need, low risk, moderate risk, high risk in a narrative format. We have mentioned that the CCRP document, hold on one second for me. Someone has asked me to make it a little bit wider, so I'm going to try to do that. Is that better, Tristy? Awesome. We're getting better at being responsive to the needs that are being expressed to us, so thank you for your patience as we do that. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about that? About translating the page 6, which is your target population and your data. Caitlin is going to talk to you about how to pull this data from the pipeline data. I'm just talking to you about what parts of the CCRP relate to the RFP. So what goes in the boxes on the right is coming to you in just a little bit with the lovely Caitlin. Does anybody have any questions about this part? Okay, we're going to move on. So if you look at this slide, we're looking now at Part 2, Case Management Service Delivery, and Part 3, Priority Services. So Part 2, Case Management Service Delivery is page 7 in the CCRP. The scope of work is there at the bottom of the RFP. Well, actually, it's the next page of the RFP. And so we're going to go back to the CCRP, and we're going to go to page 7. So if you look on your screen to the right, up at the top in the yellow box, you'll see a link to some of the documents that may be useful to you in thinking about completing this process. It is an active link, so if you have it in a Word format, you should be able to click that link and it would actually take you to the website where the documents are. You're looking for the LAPRI overarching policy, the LAPRI case logic model, and the collaborative case supervision and management model. So all of this information has been made available to a lot of you, certainly to the co-chairs. How you switch back and forth between all of this theoretical data and how you use it is included in the workbook material. So what I'd encourage you to do before you complete this part of the CCRP is go back to the workbook, which is on the website, and read up, because it has the instructions and the checklists and the best practices on how to design this part of the community reentry model. And so to the degree that we are able to interpret what needs to be done, there is a part of rolling out this model that is a little bit of self-education and research in the workbook information that has been provided to you. And so you will need to spend a little time with these documents sort of getting into what I call like the milieu, getting into the ecosystem of what it is that you're writing and picking up the vernacular and looking at the evidence-based models. And that's going to guide you so that it doesn't feel like you're having to create it from scratch, if that makes sense. And so I'm hoping that those documents, now that you're getting into this part of it, these documents that have been being emailed to you and that are now available to you on the website will now become very relevant to helping you design your service delivery models and your community plan. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so the comprehensive community reentry plan document, which is on the right-hand side of the screen, has really been designed to walk you through writing your narrative. In some places, it actually has the beginnings of your sentences, and you just need to fill in what the answers to the rest of that sentence should be for your local parish. And so I'm hoping that as you're looking at this document, it's becoming less foreign and it's beginning to feel more like a guide to guide you through writing your community plan. That is certainly how it was intended. Okay, so on the left-hand side is the scope of work. And as you can see, this is where you're getting into the narrative part of what you're going to do as a result of your contract with the DPSC to provide these services. This is written probably a little different than many of you who write foundation grants. So it's written more like a scope of work contract for services. And so on the left-hand side of your screen, your scope of work is there and it's laying out. So if you are writing this, I would copy and paste this into your document to begin writing that. But also look at where the information that's on the right-hand side of the screen is already answering these questions for you. And it might only require, as you're writing the narrative, to comply with the scope of work as set out in the RFP. You're taking what's in the CCRP, which is here on the right-hand side, and you're just customizing that a little bit to read like a customized case management and service delivery system. Does anybody have any questions about that part? Okay. We are moving. Oh, okay, so right below there is the performance measurement plan. Okay, so going back to the scope of work, we're going to go to page 11 of part 3. part of responding to the scope will be drawn from your statewide priority 1 service areas. And so on the right-hand side of your screen, what you can see is that there are some instructions to you about how to select the information that goes into the part that is coming after. So to the degree that your comprehensive community plan at this stage is focused on these top 5 or 6 priority service areas, if there is a form that deals with something that you're not addressing, you can just take it out. It doesn't need to be a part of the CCRP at this stage. Next year, when we go through the community needs assessment process again, and we adjust and modify our comprehensive community plan to meet the needs of the next cohort of folks who are coming out, then you may be including those tier 2 services. Is that clear to everyone? Does anyone have any questions about that? And so what you'll see in the CCRP is that there is a page for each service area that asks you to identify your assets, your barriers, your gaps, and your proposed solutions. Okay, and so this is what you've been working on in your community needs assessment. It's all related. So this will be a cut and paste from your community needs assessment. The proposed solutions are going to be how your community has decided to address those barriers and gaps. And so I'm going to just scroll through here, but you'll see that there's legal services, there's family reunification services, there's housing. And so you will go through and complete each of these sections of the CCRP, and then you'll be ready to talk about them in the scope of work. Okay? You will, in the CCRP, you will remove any pages that have to do with service areas that are not in those top 6 or 5 for this CCRP for this year for this body of work. Next year, we'll add those all back in, and hopefully we will have resources available to expand the amount of proposed solutions that we will be able to fund to meet those unmet needs. Okay, now that we're caught up, we're going to move to the performance measurement plan, performance metrics in the RFP, and the section that relates to is the last page of the CCRP. So go ahead and flip to the last page, page 31. Sorry, I have a very busy desktop. So take a second to look over that. So the performance measurement plan is going to be about how do you capture the impact of the work that you're doing? How is it making a difference? You should, based on the information from the workbook, the case logic models, the evidence-based information that's been provided to your committees, which is also on the website. On the SocialWorx website, under the LAPRISTA Resource Center, you will see an icon that says Steering Team Resources. If you look under Steering Team Resources, click that link, and what you'll see toward the bottom is, or toward the middle actually, I think it is, that you will see the committee resource materials. The committee resource materials have been provided to your steering team committees if you've received the committee training. If you haven't, these committee materials will help you think about best practices and evidence-based practices in dealing with the top 4 priority areas. So behavioral health, housing, education, and employment. And so there are some narrative guidebooks in these materials that will suggest to you what are some of the principles and practices that you need to build into your service delivery plan so that you get the best outcomes. And there will be information in there about what kind of impacts you'll measure. If you look in the case logic models and the DPSC system blueprint, those are also suggesting to you metrics that need to be measured. Because remember, the RFP is asking you to design programs that achieve reducing recidivism. So you're going to be looking for those metrics that are indicative that your returning citizens are being successful, that they're being successful longer, that they're accessing more services, they're accessing more services consistently, those kinds of things, those kinds of metrics. So we are going to cover the performance plan and the budget detail in another session. I believe that's on the July the 31st. So if you haven't registered for that, please register. And we will be covering that in a little bit more detail. Right now, I just want you to get familiar with where that information is covered in the CCRP on the right-hand side and what that relates to. If you have your RFP printed out and in a binder, make yourself some notes to remind you that you're going to go to page 31 when you get to this section in the RFP. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. The next section we're going to cover is proposed staff qualifications. And in order to respond to this area, we're going to go back up. Okay, bear with me one moment. And I'm going to pull up the section 1. Somehow it got closed. So in the meantime, if you would please go to your section 1. That is the challenge of this model. There are so many documents to keep track of. Holy cow. Okay, I found it. Yay. All right, here we go. Okay. So in section 1 of the CCRP, oops, sorry, I'm back in that other document. It doesn't want me to look at it. Here we go. We are all doing our best and everything is going to be okay. Okay, so that is not in part 1. So let's see, is it in part 2? Okay, there is a section in the CCRP that deals with describing the the intermediary or organizational role. And in that section, you will want to talk about the qualifications of your intermediary to serve as the intermediary. And you're also going to want to talk about each of the staff that are going to be allocated to the work. But what we wanted to bring your attention to in the RFP is that under proposed staff qualifications, this is where you want to include information about your intermediary role. The place where you describe your intermediary role is in one of these documents, but I cannot lay my hands on it right this very minute. So that just goes toward underlining that, yes, it's complicated. Yes, you're total rock stars for enduring the discomfort to get familiar with all of this. And yes, we are all going to have to be patient and kind and compassionate to one another as we wrap our heads and our hands around what basically amounts to, you know, ending mass incarceration in Louisiana, which is no small feat. So let's just be kind and understanding of each other as we are moving through that process. So I don't know where that is. I will follow up with an email to let you know where that is. So I'll make a point of that. The last piece is the cost proposal. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about the slide that I could not find for you in the CCRP? Okay. Well, thank you for being kind and compassionate to me. I will make sure that you get your questions answered. Okay. And then the last part, the budget detail, which again, we are going to cover in another session. Oh, not that one. Get that RFP back up there. So the budget, this is the budget detail. So if you go through the CCRP and you complete this budget detail for your comprehensive community plan, which includes a way to talk about how you're going to spend the JR funds, how you're going to leverage that with federal, state, local, private, and other funds. That is going to help you demonstrate to and describe to the DOC about how you're going to leverage those funds. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the idea is that all of the Tier 1 parishes and Tier 2, but all the Tier 1 parishes are going to complete their CCRP, and then you're going to attach that to the RFP as evidence of your collaboration. But you're still going to need to complete the RFP and the budget detail with this information. I want to point to, if you look to the left-hand side of the screen, right at the bottom of 1.9.8, right here, proposals with a blended funding stream, i.e. multiple sources of financial support, will be given strong consideration. So the DOC is really looking for you to leverage their investment and do that by using in-kind and donated resources, funding, to leverage that. So if you look at the budget detail on the right-hand side, you will see that you'll have in the first column the allocation for the DOC, the Justice Reinvestment Funds, let's call it that. And then you will put in one of the other columns what your cash or in-kind donations might be. And so one of the examples that Dennis has used and that I'm continuing to use is, for example, if you are operating, let's say, as a, quote, urgent care, and you've been serving whomever walks in your door, say, like with transitional housing, and you have, let's say, 10 beds. One way that you could structure this part of the work would be to say, I am going to allocate 5 of my 10 beds to serve moderate to high risk and need returning citizens. And then those 10 beds, which are funded through some other resource, become an in-kind contribution. And then you could perhaps then get funding from JR for an additional 5 beds, which would make a total of 10 beds for moderate to high risk prisoners. But the JR money is being used to cover 5 beds, which is being added to the work that you may already be doing in supplying that transitional housing beds. Does that make sense to people? As a model to think about in-kind donations, leveraging, and how to design your service delivery model to pivot to moderate to high risk returning citizens. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. I'm going to assume you're just enthralled with our with the beauty of this information, and that you haven't fallen asleep on me, and that's why nobody has any questions. So we're going to just move on. Again, I want to remind you that we'll be covering budget detail on July the 31st. And so do remember to register for that so that we can go through that in much greater detail to get you ready for that part. Okay. We're going to go back to the slides. So this training is about articulating the target population and the numbers with the pipeline to data. July 31st will be a LAPRISTA virtual training session. I will put the link to register on the website. Go to, under the LAPRISTA Resource Center, you can go to LAPRISTA events, and I will have the link there for you. And we'll be covering the performance evaluation and the budget detail. The week of August 6th, you will be working on writing the proposal using the CCRP information. August 9th will be when the DOC provides written responses to the questions about the RFP posted. Remember to get your questions into DOC so that they can answer those completely and in writing. One of the things that Tammy asked, if you weren't at the pre-proposal conference, was rather than waiting until the very last day, which is, let's see, July 26th, written questions are due. So rather than waiting to the very last day, the sooner you get the questions in, the sooner they can be researching the answers to those. And so they will issue the written questions on August 9th, but they can get them out more quickly if you get them the questions more quickly. And then, of course, August 20th, we may be creating some technical assistance opportunities either on site or by telephone or webinar to support you in finishing up the writing of the RFP and the CCRP and making sure that you are moving along in that process. Obviously, August 23rd, those proposals are due. That is the deadline. If you haven't signed up, if you're intending to apply and you haven't signed up at the LAPAC website, you should do that, because if they make any amendments to the RFP, they're going to post those there. And if you're registered as a vendor, then you will, you register as a vendor, and then you have to put the, there's a code that you have to put in there so that you can be notified of any changes to that service area, and then they will email you if there's changes to the RFP. We are not posting the RFP on our website because changes and addenda may be posted, so the best place for you to get current, accurate data about the RFP and the requirements and the deadlines is at the LAPAC website. So we're going to always redirect you there. So we're just looking forward to next week. CCRP Part 2, or sorry, today, CCRP Part 2, the target population correlates with the RFP Section 1.95, which we were just looking at. The projects need to address one or more of the goals listed in the 1.3 goals and objectives. That's reducing returns to prison and improving community coordination of reentry services. So all the work that you're doing with the community needs assessment and the community planning is addressing these issues. And so the work that you're doing is directly related to what the RFP is seeking to fund. So the qualifications are projects designed to produce specific measurable changes in systems, organizations, and participants, and projects that are in alignment with the LAPRI objectives as identified in Section 1.2. So the LAPRI Objective 3 is to work with communities to demonstrate reduced recidivism through improved case planning and case management built on actuarial risk need assessment, good data, enhanced human service delivery, and comprehensive planning. And so we're about to bring Caitlin on to talk with you about the data. Again, just touching very quickly on the qualifications for funding. They have to address needs of high risk and or high needs individuals. It has to address gaps in service in the region. You have to work with other community partners to fill those gaps. And you have to use evidence-based practices and strategies and offer clear results. Okay. So we've covered a fair amount of this. The problem statement should include opportunity, challenge, issue, or needs a proposal seeks to address, identify gaps in the target parish, use the relevant data, identify the target population, gender, age, offense, and history. So here, let me. So let's just very quickly go back to that section again. So you'll be identifying the target population and the estimated number of participants. The pipeline data is going to tell you how many people are coming back to your parish. So that's going to give you the scope of that work. So we're using this data, and LAPRI is working to prove its effectiveness by improving case planning and management practices, but it's the different part is driven by the individual risks and needs of each prisoner. And so the parts of this process will be, as we said earlier, really getting a profile of each person that's coming back to your community and designing the solutions that will meet their needs in a very specific and customized way, tailored to their specific needs. So we've been focused on the pipeline data for the 13 parishes that contribute nearly 70% of all the prisoners to the state prison system. And so here on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see that, let's see if I can get that any bigger. Oh, no, it's going to go big. Okay, so these are the Tier 1 parishes: Caddo, East Baton Rouge, Jefferson, Orleans, and St. Tammany. The Tier 2 parishes are also Calcasieu, Ouachita, Lafayette, Rapides, Livingston, Bossier, Terrebonne, and Lafourche. And did I say Ouachita right? My folks in Ouachita have been schooling me on how to say it correctly. There are going to be 3 types of pipeline. Oh, am I in your section, Caitlin?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was like, what is all this? I don't remember this. Okay, well, we're going to go back. Where did yours start? Right here.
Next slide. Nope. Forward.
Okay, this is you.
Do you want to give me control and I can navigate?
It's coming to you.
All right.
Oh, screen. Look, my hands are off the keyboard.
All right.
If I touch the keyboard, it brings it back. Are you sharing your screen, Caitlin?
No.
You're not, okay.
No.
Are you sharing your video?
Yes. Everybody should be able to see me.
Okay, can everybody see Caitlin? I think they're all asleep. I put them to sleep. I'm sorry. I'm not much of a warm-up act. Sorry.
It's okay.
All right, take it away. So Caitlin Canfield is from LPHI, and she has been working very diligently to get this data pulled together. She's been working very closely with DOC to meet their requirements for the rigor of this data, would you say? And so now she's ready to guide you through the data.
Yes. All right. Hi, everybody. I am Caitlin Canfield. I'm the Associate Director of Evaluation at the Louisiana Public Health Institute. And so we have been working, as Vonnie mentioned, to pull together pipeline data for both the Tier 1 and Tier 2 parishes. As you probably already know, the Tier 1 and Tier 2 parishes were identified as contributors to pipeline data because they contribute such a significant proportion of incarcerated individuals to the state prison system. Vonnie, I seem to have a delay in advancing the slides. Could I ask you to move to the next slide, please?
No problem.
Thank you. All right, so as Vonnie went through, here's an overview of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 parishes. We are saying that there are 13 parishes because Terrebonne and Lafourche have decided to combine forces with their task force. All right, next slide. All right, so everyone has likely already had a chance to see the Pipeline 1 data. So the Pipeline 1 data, which was released a number of months ago, provided the current number of people within the state prison system, so currently incarcerated, broken down by parish of conviction. And Pipeline 1 data was significant because it provided the first insight into both the current number of individuals incarcerated, broken down by parish of incarceration, as well as a glimpse into both their needs profile as well as their risk profile based on the LARNA system, which is DPSC's former and kind of current system that's being used to assess prisoners' needs as well as their risk profile. And when I say risk profile, I'm referring to their risk of recidivating. Now, as many of you are likely aware, DPSC is working in collaboration with LSU to develop a new system for assessing prisoners' risk of recidivating as well as their needs profiles. And the idea is that this new system, known as Tiger, will eventually replace LARNA and will provide greater and more accurate insight into prisoners' risk and need profiles, therefore increasing local providers' ability to predict what exactly the needs and risks of those prisoners coming home will be. So Pipeline 2 data is what we are going to be focusing on today. So just there to the right of that red arrow. So what Pipeline 2 data is, and I hope that everyone, Vonnie has sent this out a couple of times, the data release, it's a very large PDF. And so the purposes of my presentation today will be to walk you through this data report. We're going to be using East Baton Rouge Parish as an example as we walk through the report. So this report provides you with a snapshot or a glimpse into 2017 releases, again broken down similarly to Pipeline 1, broken down by parish of conviction. And similarly to Pipeline 1, we're using LARNA to assess the needs of the prisoners. In contrast to Pipeline 1, we are now using the very first round of Tiger data in order to establish risk profiles for 2017 releases. And so the goal of this Pipeline 2 data is that it can serve as a proxy for individuals that are going to be released during 2018 as well as during 2019. We do not expect tremendous deviation from year to year in level of need and risk. And so we can use this data with a pretty high degree of certainty to predict what 2018 is and will look like, since we're in the middle of the year, as well as 2019. Eventually, what the goal is, as Vonnie has discussed earlier in the presentation, is Pipeline 3 data. Now, Pipeline 3 data is very different from Pipeline 2. Pipeline 2 data is aggregate data at the group level, broken down by parish, need, and risk profile. Pipeline 3 data, in contrast, which is forthcoming and currently beginning development, will be individual level, both need and risk data on individual prisoners who will be returning to prison, or who will be returning from prison to their communities. Needs and risk in Pipeline 3 data will be established using Tiger, and these individual need and risk profiles will be used to develop the reentry accountability plans. Next slide, please. So I think you skipped a slide. So Pipeline 2, this data report was developed by the Louisiana Public Health Institute, who I work with, or work for, who is an LAPRI partner in conjunction with the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, and was made possible by a grant from the Angelina and Huey Wilson Foundation. Next slide, please. All right, so you may be like, why does this matter? Why do I care about Pipeline 2 data? Well, let me give you a couple of insights. So like we mentioned, these are providing insight into state prisoners who were convicted in Tier 1 and Tier 2 parishes who were released in 2017. So this is really the first glimpse that we have into the risk and needs profiles for these state prisoners who left prison during 2017. And as I mentioned before, the really most important factor as to why this matters is that it can be used as a proxy for release projections in 2018 and 2019. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to go over the different components of this report. So it has three main components. The first component, and if you all have the report open, please feel free to refer to it. We will be using East Baton Rouge Parish as an example as we move through this report. East Baton Rouge Parish's profile is located on page 5. So the first component of this data report for each parish is demographics. So it includes a parish level demographic profile drawn mostly from the American Communities Survey, providing insight into the sex breakdown, the racial breakdown, as well as the educational breakdown of that parish and the unemployment rate. We compare that parish level demographic profile with both those individuals who are currently incarcerated, broken down by parish of conviction, as well as 2017 releases. So again, we have that demographics for the overall parish. We have demographics for individuals who are currently incarcerated and who were convicted in that given parish. If on page 5, they were convicted in East Baton Rouge Parish. And then we have the demographic breakdown for individuals who were released in 2017. Next slide, please. The next component of the data report, again, if you're referring to page 5, this is line in the middle of the page, is the risk need matrix. Now again, these are risks and needs for 2017 releases, but can be used as a proxy to predict what the risk and need breakdown will be for individuals released in 2018 and 2019. So the risk and need matrix provides insight into the distribution of needs established by LARNA, as well as risk established by TIGER, the new system that is being developed in collaboration with LSU for state prisoners who were released during 2017. Now, what you really need to pay attention to in this risk need matrix is the priority target population. The priority target population is those prisoners who are categorized as either high risk low needs, high risk moderate needs, high risk high needs, moderate risk moderate needs, and moderate risk high needs. So there are 5 different categories that are then combined to establish the LAPRI priority target population. One note regarding the high risk high needs group. This group, we have chosen to only include 50%. It's a very small group as a proportion of the total number of prisoners released. We are only including 50% because some of these individuals are just going to be career criminals, they're going to be psychopaths, etc. And so the likelihood that they are actually going to be released is going to be very low. So next slide. The next component here on the profile for East Baton Rouge Parish and all of the parishes, both Tier 1 and Tier 2, then takes that LAPRI priority target population and seeks to establish the projected number of recidivists from that target population. So what this tells you is both what is the number of people who we really need to be focused on who may be at moderate to high risk of recidivating, and also what can we expect as a parish to see in terms of the number of people who will recidivate within the next few years following release. So what we took is the LAPRI target priority population, and then we took the 2011, we looked at individuals who were released during calendar year 2011, and we looked over 5 years to establish how many of them eventually returned to prison within 5 years of being released. That rate was 55%, so we're using that as a proxy or an estimate for what the return to prison rate would be for these individuals who were released in 2017. So you multiply the total number of people within the target population by the return to prison rate, and you get the number of individuals who we expect to recidivate within the target population. Next slide, please. All right, so we are now going to use East Baton Rouge Parish as an example. So if you refer to page 5, you will be able to follow along. So in the left-hand column, we have the different demographics of interest, total population, male, female, white, black, etc. We then have the parish profile for East Baton Rouge Parish, the overall population breakdown. We then have insight into the adult incarcerated population in East Baton Rouge Parish. As you can see, there are some discrepancies there as you compare between the overall parish population. The adult incarcerated population tends to be far more male, also has a much higher proportion of individuals who identify as being Black, and a much lower level of education. Then, as we shift to the far right column, we look at the demographic profile of those individuals who are set to be released. Next slide, please. Now we're looking at the risk need matrix. So as you can see, here are these 5 categories that are bolded and in a much darker shading in the middle. Next slide. And which are encircled in this red circle. So these are the 5 categories that are going to comprise the LA-PRI priority target population. Next slide, please. So adding these 5 categories together with only 50% of high risk, high need, we are then establishing the LA-PRI priority target population for East Baton Rouge Parish, which is 707 individuals, and which is 57% of the total prisoners released to East Baton Rouge Parish. So 1,235 individuals were released during 2017 who were convicted in East Baton Rouge Parish. We are assuming that they will be returning to East Baton Rouge Parish. Excuse me. And so 57% of those total releases, or 707 people, are the LA-PRI priority target population for East Baton Rouge. Next slide, please. We then take those 707 people and establish them in the 3rd component of the report as the number of priority target population prisoners projected to return during financial year 2019. Using the 2011 baseline return to prison rate for high and medium risk prisoners of 55%, we then establish that your parish, the parish task force for East Baton Rouge Parish, could expect to see 389 recidivists from their target population. And that basically concludes my portion of the presentation. This next question, which has TBD listed at the bottom, excuse me, for the number of projected recidivists is something that you all will be working on, as my understanding, with Vonnie, to establish the number of projected recidivists that will be served by the task force. Vonnie, I'm going to turn it back over to you unless anyone has any questions at this time.
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
My name is Juan Rie, and I had a question about the different designations for the LAPRI priority target population. Is there anywhere in the document that explains what those terms mean? So as far as HR/LN, are those terms described anywhere in this document?
Yeah, so the HR and LN is just high risk, for example. We just wrote that because we didn't have a lot of room. But if that isn't clear, that's an important thing for us to know. So if you're looking, Vonnie, could we go back a slide? Okay, so here on the slide, where you see in the lower left-hand corner LA-PRI priority target population, where it says HR/LN, that just is referring to high risk, low needs. And then HR/MN is high risk, medium needs. So the high risk, low need, for example, under this example is the, if you look at high risk and low need, the cell that corresponds to all of those, which is the leftmost small shaded cell that says 17 people, which is 1% of the total releases, that is the HR/LN cell. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I just was wondering, like, when you say high risk, low needs, what exactly does that mean? Like, does that mean that they're at high risk of returning to prison, but they don't have a lot of needs? Like, I'm wondering if there's like a clear definition as to what those terms mean.
Yes. So if you refer to the end of the report, beginning on page 15, we have a detailed methodology which goes into how prisoners, so risk refers to prisoners' risk of recidivating. And this is a measure that is based on many different factors associated with that person, including their age, type of conviction, what they were convicted for, how long they've been in prison. And so needs more refer to the types of needs and the level of need that that person is going to be facing as they return to prison, as they return to their community. Excuse me. So if you refer to the methodology component, that should provide you with additional insight into what risk and need mean. Now, the needs scoring is a composite score that is based on, and we have this included in the methodology itself. It's a composite score that is based on the LARNA tool, which is a tool that DPSC has been using for a very long time to assess the needs of prisoners. It looks at antisocial thinking, at substance use and abuse, mental health and depression, and level of education in order to establish the prisoner's needs. There are some limitations to the LARNA tool, and once we move on to the Pipeline 3 data, where rather than LARNA, which has been historically used by DPSC to assess prisoner needs, Tiger will be used. You all will have much more detailed insight into what the specific needs of those prisoners are. At this point in time, this is really just aggregate data, and so we're really just able to group people into whether or not they would be considered a lower need person, so probably someone who already will have established housing, who won't have as hard of a time finding employment once they're released, as opposed to a moderate need and a high need person when they're being released. So this is really just more to use for general planning purposes and to provide you all with ballpark numbers in terms of the number of people that you can expect to be serving as they're released, as opposed to really giving specific insight into detailed needs. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? And please do refer to the methodology. I would recommend reading through that if you have any initial questions as you're looking through your own parish level profile. And then from there, if you do have additional questions about the methodology, please feel more than free to reach out to me directly. I would be happy to respond to you via email or set up a phone call so that we can really dig deeper into the data for your parish. My email address is going to be listed at the end of this presentation. So if there aren't any additional questions, Vonnie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Caitlin. Fabulous job. You did a much better job doing your slides than I did, so I'm really glad you took over. Let's see, let's get forward here to where we need to be. So I just have one last slide that I want to talk about. At this point, the slide that you're looking at is actually a cut and paste from the CCRP document, part 2, page 5. If you need me to, I can pull that up. Oops, so that you can look at it. And let's see, to page 5, right here. And so we need to modify a little bit of this, and so I think I'll make these changes and put this document up on the website so that you can have the most current document. This is going to be where you record the cost of the proposed solutions that you have identified to meet those top 6 priority service areas. But I want to really draw your attention to this part right down here. On the right-hand side of your screen, about the middle, in the green box, there are blue letters which say per client cost, operation/service subtotal is an amount divided by the target number, which comes from page 10, line D, which is going to give you your per client cost. If you went, I'll say it again, but I said it earlier, if you went to the pre-proposal conference and you went through the RFP, they took you to the part that showed you where the scoring, the person who identifies or presents the lowest per client cost automatically receives, I believe, 25 points. So the lowest cost goes to the top of the pile. So don't forget when you're going through the budgeting process that you need to focus on this per client cost. This piece of information in the CCRP is going to take you through the process of getting there. And so does anybody have any questions? Just general questions about that, because we're going to cover that part in more detail at the next session. Any more questions? Okay, everybody but Quan is asleep. Actually, I see Judge Edwards on there. Good job. Hi, Judge. How are you? Okay, so we're going to close out the session today. Again, my name is Vonnie Hawkins with SocialWorx Institute. You can reach me with this conference information. I'm sorry, this email and phone number information. And Caitlin's information is also listed there. I will make sure that everyone who attended the conference or who registered receives a copy of the slides. And make sure that you register for the next session. So are there any questions or comments as we are at the end of our session? Well, I've been asking for kudos when we get you guys out of here quicker. So I think that it is approximately 3:40, and that gives you 20 minutes to do something else. So please, give us a good rating. I will send each of you an evaluation. Please fill out these evaluations so that we can demonstrate to our funders and our investors and our stakeholders that we are meeting your needs. And if we're not meeting your needs, it's like that old thing they say at the restaurant. If you had a good time, tell your friends. If you didn't, tell me. So if you're having a good experience, I want you to invite your friends and your colleagues to come to the trainings. I want you to let us know in the evaluations, but if it's not meeting your needs, if there's things that we're missing, if there are elements that we need to include, please include that in the evaluation, because hopefully you're seeing that we're getting a little better over time, and we're winning or we're learning. We're never losing, but we're winning and we're learning from our challenges, and we're using that to benefit you. This is LAPRISTA. We are your steering team association, and very soon we'll be reaching out for, once the RFP is out of the way, we will be reaching out for folks from your local jurisdictions to help us grow this membership association to exist in perpetuity, to ensure that it remains member focused, member driven, member inspired. And so I want to thank you for your time today. I want to wish you safe journeys. Breathe and flow. We are here to help you. So reach out if you're having any challenges, and take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Don't forget to register for the next one.
Thank you.